The Police and Crime Panel, an extraordinary meeting, and thanks very much, members, for pitching up at short notice. The meeting clearly is a confirmation meeting for the OPCC Chief Exec and following on the OPCC Treasurer to take over from Duncan, who's done a sterling job of work and seems to want to now disappear out to some Caribbean island or something. I'll just do some housekeeping details. In the unlikely event that the fire alarm sounds, and we haven't heard one recently, have we? I don't know if there's one due. Everyone leave by the meeting room door, front entrance of the council house, and across to the muster point, the other side of the car park. Also remind members and anybody else that the meeting is being webcast as we speak. There's no members of the public here today, I don't think. Doesn't look like it. I welcome Commissioner Duncan to the meeting and the prospective Chief Executive, who is sitting just over there, who will come forward shortly. Now, Lynn, any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Sutton and Mrs Squires, and also from Sarah Wackfer.
Great, thank you. Now, item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. I know there are some declarations of interest, so I would ask panel members to make any declarations of interest in respect of any items on the agenda. John.
Personal interest, Chairman, as a member of Devon County Council and Chairman of the Audit Committee.
Thank you. Robert, yes?
I have a personal interest. I know the candidate on a professional basis for safer communities in Torbay.
Good, thank you. Philip?
Chairman, I think item 2 on my agenda is minutes actually, but under item 3, declarations of interest, I am a county councillor. As to the best of my knowledge, I do not know the individual candidate, but just in case I do, I will declare an interest.
Good, thanks. Hedge your bets. And I will declare a personal interest because I know both of the candidates on a professional basis during the last 8 or so years. Item 3, if there are no more declarations of interest, item 3 are the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of July. And I'll go through them page by page. You will have them in front of you. Page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think that's all. Members happy that I sign them off as a true reflection? Thank you very much. Thanks, Lynn. Before I lose them amongst the rest of the papers. Thanks very much. Right, now the purpose of the meeting, members, item 4 are confirmation hearings, and it's to ask panel members to consider the Commissioner's selection of the initially Chief Executive. And Mrs Hughes, can I ask you to come forward to the table, please? Thank you very much. I think, Commissioner, 5 minutes, you won't take that long, I know, and Mrs Hughes, another 5 minutes after that, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you very much. Commissioner.
Good morning, panel. And I just wanted to firstly say thank you for organising this meeting at short notice in the middle of August. I appreciate your time out to be able to come here and do this confirmation hearing for 2 really critical roles in my team. If all goes well today, hopefully I'll be able to secure the senior management team in place to support me in my role as Commissioner. I really do appreciate your efforts getting here today. I think as the chairman said, I have to really thank Duncan for his efforts in being an interim chief exec. And since we've lost Andrew White, he's been juggling that and treasurer and estates. And you can see why it's really critical that we appoint some people to enable the team to be taken forward. I thought I'd quickly outline the recruitment process and then let Fran speak about what she feels she can bring. Firstly, we used an outside recruitment agency to help recruit this role because we wanted as many applicants to look at as possible, and we had 63 come forward. We used Hayes Recruitment, and as you'll see in the report, there were a range of activities that Hayes did on behalf of me to ensure that we got a long list of candidates and then a short list of candidates for us to actually fully interview. I was really delighted with the range of applicants. They were very high quality, and the top 5, without a doubt, were 4 of them were local people. I'm really delighted that, again, we've got somebody local who's going to potentially be appointed into this role. There was a huge assessment process, so there was shortlisting by Hayes, who did interview selection over the phone to get to a long list, and then there was more direct interviews face-to-face to get to a short list. Then those who were on that short list actually had to do role plays. We had actors involved, and we also they had to do psychometric tests, and they also had to do case studies and presentations. So it's been quite a lengthy process in terms of the recruitment on this. And I'd really also like to thank Councillor Mike Salton, who's been advising me independently and was part of the selection panel, and also Kate Canally, who's the Chief Exec of Cornwall Council. She gave some very helpful and insightful questions during the interview process. Just to be clear, that the 5 areas that we were looking at in terms of the assessment was decision-making, leadership, public service, professionalism and working with others. And without a doubt, Fran Hughes demonstrated her strength and was head and shoulders above all of the candidates. What I will say to you, that Mrs Hughes is an absolute experienced senior leader in the public sector with a proven track record in delivering high quality public services in a multidisciplinary environment. And it's really pleasing to hear panel members who know both of these candidates and have had interactions with them, because I know that their reputation will precede them in terms of that. I think the really key thing for me is we need a chief executive in the Commissioner's office to drive forward the police and crime plan that you've spent lots of time scrutinising and want to see delivered, and along with the estates function about how we do some of the work around the estates, and obviously with the budget process coming up, you'll be looking at whether or not we're using the money effectively. So it's really, really important that we've got someone who's got all of those skills. And I think through her considerable experiences in the fields of community safety and emergency planning as well, as her experience in leading the design and delivery of lots of departmental restructures and business transformation, Mrs Hughes is going to definitely demonstrate very high competency in these areas of decision-making, leadership and professionalism. And as we're transforming policing, our role is to support the Chief Constable in the transformation that's taking place within policing. And I think to have somebody who will be able to do that is really, really key. I would say that one of the things that's absolutely critical, and I'd really appreciate your support on, is thinking about timings in terms of this chief executive role. Even if we have a confirmation agreement today, there's still a 3-month potentially before a start date. So I'm really, really, I would appreciate no delay in timing on that. But I'll hand over to Mrs Hughes to say.
I'll hand over, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris wants to say something quickly.
Thank you, Chair. When the previous CEO, Andrew White, was interviewed, etc., I voiced my concerns about the structure of the panel at the time. I must say how delighted I am to see the names on the panel this time. A far better panel, in my opinion, to last time. There is someone at the very least, representing Cornwall Council.
Yeah.
So that was, but there was a concern I had initially, but back then. But
yeah.
Congratulations on this panel.
Yeah. Well, they have to work across the whole patch. That's why it's quite important.
Well, there's a first for you, Commissioner.
Times are changing.
Mrs Hughes, please. 5 minutes, please. Don't have to take 5 minutes, but please don't make any more.
I'll do my best, Chair. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity of being in front of you this morning. I thought it would just be helpful to give you a bit of a broader idea than you've got in your paperwork about my background. So I'm currently the Assistant Director of Communities and Customer Services at Torbay Council. So I have a very large remit of services that range from both frontline and corporate services. So things like waste collection and disposal, highways, regulatory services, IT, revenue and benefits, culture and events, and I'm sure I've missed quite a few teams in there, so and my apologies. But I have a long career in local government. I've been in local government for 24 years, and I have professional background in environmental health, public health and community safety, and those three elements have followed me throughout my career. So with the work that I do at the moment, I'm involved not only in frontline delivery of services, but also the Council's senior leadership team and major infrastructure projects. So to give you an idea, I've been involved in the delivery of the South Devon Highway, so the new road that links Devon and Torbay, and I'm also involved in the new energy from waste plant here in Plymouth. I've got a long background in partnership working, particularly within the criminal justice sector, so work very closely with police, probation, fire service, the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, to name but a few, but also very active in the community and voluntary sector, and I was involved in our Community Development Trust from its inception through to its delivery, and have been involved in a wide range of grant funding initiatives across both the statutory and community and voluntary sector for a large number of years. I'm very familiar with the challenges of working within the public sector, and particularly the ongoing austerity, so I'm familiar with the challenges that will be ahead in terms of both the budget and the police estate. I'm very familiar with working in a complex political environment, so this for me will be no different. This is a role with which I feel I'll be familiar. This is a really exciting opportunity. The breadth of work across Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly for me will give me the opportunity to have that influence over a much bigger footprint than I've had previously. But equally, I'm aware that the threats, and particularly the tragic events of last night in Spain as well, are a real threat for us here in the southwest. So lots of wide-ranging agendas ranging from terrorism right the way through to domestic abuse, child sexual exploitation, cybercrime, and all those emerging threats that we have here as well as everywhere else in the country, and I'm really looking forward to getting involved. So I see the role very much as three key elements. So the leadership of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, very much about good governance and making sure that that governance is sound and appropriate for the role, but also as head of paid service for the staff that already exist within the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and I'm very much looking forward to getting used to working with them and working with you in the future. And what's really exciting for me is the opportunity to start defining what policing looks like in the 21st century, and doing that here in Devon and Cornwall. And my ambition really is for Devon and Cornwall to be known as best in class and an area of good practice, and we can absolutely play our part both on the regional, local and national stage. So I think, Chair, that gives an overview, and I hope that that's slightly under the 5 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ms Hughes. I will open it up to questions from the panel, and because I have the finger on the button, I'm going to ask the first one, if members don't mind. You mentioned your large remit that you have presently at Torbay. In fact, the panel, I think, generally speaking, has a disquiet about the police estate. It seems to have flip-flopped from the Chief Constable to the OPCC, back to the Chief Constable. It is now sitting quite clearly within your remit, or future remit. And I'm particularly bothered about the rebuild of Middlemore. £30 million of taxpayers' money are going into that, and I don't see any progress at all, any coordinated progress at the moment. Can you enlighten the panel as to your thoughts about Middlemore, particularly the criminal justice area? As someone just said, it was a posh name for a police station, and the rest of the estates. Your general thoughts, please.
Certainly. So my understanding is that the new criminal justice hub at Middlemore is already funded and planning permission is already been received and being implemented. And the remit really for that model is to assist in some of the operational delivery, but also to improve what has been a poorer facility, for want of a better description, at Heavy Tree Road, so the movement of that across. Obviously, I'm not fully cited on all the detail of the business case and the progress, but it will certainly be one of the things that will be first on my agenda if you agree the appointment today, to make sure that we have got an absolutely watertight business case and that the funding is in place. My understanding is that in order to meet the planning conditions, then work needs to start on that facility before Christmas, and then it's an approximately 2-year lead time. So I'll be looking forward to making sure that we are on time and on target and on budget to deliver that as we go forward. In terms of the overall police estate, I think there's already an agreed estate strategy in place. And I'll be wanting to have a look at that to make sure that we've got all of Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly absolutely catered for, and making sure that that links back to the agreed police and crime plan, to make sure that we've got that connectivity with neighbourhoods and that we're delivering, along with the Strategic Alliance, absolutely what's needed for Devon and Cornwall. So I'd be really interested to start getting to work on some of those initiatives.
Thank you very much. Members? Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Read your CV with some interest and the job description. Now, under a previous commissioner, it didn't necessarily please all of us, but there was sometimes seemed to be a tendency that the commissioner or the chief executive was actually fronting the media campaign and actually putting forward some not particularly popular decisions of the chief executive. Now, I'm just wondering how comfortable you are in the media field, and do you see any part of your role as being the media interface for the commissioner?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I'm very familiar with working in the media. The role that I have currently and many previous roles has involved me being in front of the media for a variety of issues. I think it very much depends in terms of what the issue is as to whether it's appropriate for the Chief Executive to speak or whether that's a political voice that needs to come across, really. And I think myself and the Police and Crime Commissioner will need to work out a way of how that's appropriate. So I think if it's for operational matters and it's relation to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and very much my areas of responsibility, then absolutely it would be appropriate for me to comment in the media if there are very specific issues. However, there is a definite divide in terms of governance with regard to a political voice, and that would very much be that for the Office for the Police and Crime Commissioner to comment.
Thank you.
Further? Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Just in a sense, building on the Chairman's question about the estate, as someone who sits on a borough council and the county council and has a background of 40-odd years in the NHS, I think we've all paid lip service over the years to sharing accommodation and making best use of the public estate for the benefit of the public. I would have to say that I don't think any of us have been particularly successful in doing that. There are a few examples, but certainly not particularly successful. How do you intend to address that when you start looking at the issues to do with the police estate?
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, I think there are a number of opportunities around sharing of the estate, and I think in a small way, Torbay's done some of that under my leadership over recent times. So if you were to come into one of my teams where I'm currently employed, you would see that we very much have a shared estate. So there are fire officers, police officers, the immigration service, mental health, all working under one roof. So I'm very used to dealing with that environment. I've also been involved in the Council's One Public Estate programme and looking very much at taking that exploration further and where you would get efficiencies from joining up, both operationally and strategically. So it's an area I think we need to explore further, and I think given the geography of Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, we need to make sure that the approach that we have is consistent and that everybody has access to what they need to have access to. So very much looking forward to working with partners to understand what their own estate strategy is and how we could align that as the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of going to move on a little bit, and it sort of slightly builds on the question that was put by the councillor on my left. I want to know how you'll ensure that you act in a manner that is personally independent of the PCC. And I think building on that a little bit, that you're in a politically restricted role, yet the PCC clearly isn't, and describes herself as quite opinionated and forthright politically. That's how it's described in the papers. So I wonder how you're going to sort of manage that so that you're ensuring your personal independence of the PCC.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, it's a role in which I'm very familiar. My entire career I've held a politically restricted post, and I work in an authority currently with a directly elected mayor, so very used to that difference between the role of an officer and the role of a politician. So work always within the Nolan standards of public life and understand those very clearly and understand the governance arrangements. There will always be an interface between the Chief Executive's role and the Office of and the Police and Crime Commissioner, but actually it's getting that balance right and working that through. So that's something that, in terms of the relationship, I'll need to work on. But absolutely comfortable about where those lines would be, and it's something that I've always upheld and delivered.
Any further questions? David, yeah.
You spoke in your earlier opening about budgetary constraints, and then you also spoke about what does the future of policing look like. Have we seen the end of the policeman on the street?
Oh, that's a tough question to answer. How long have we got? I would very much hope not. And I think that's something that I would want to have a very early conversation with the Chief Constable about, and in terms of the plans both locally and with the Strategic Alliance in Dorset. Very much the police and crime plan is around that neighbourhood connectivity and understanding how that works. So I'd want to understand how that translates to how many officers might be on the street and where that accessibility might be. So yes, that's an area that I'd absolutely want to focus on, because it's not just about crime, it's about the fear of crime and public perception, and we need to make sure we get that balance right.
Philip as well.
Keith.
Thank you, Chairman.
Philip as well.
Could you just explain to me how you will ensure equality and diversity opportunities within the force are continued and expanded?
So I think equality and diversity is an area which weaves its way through all of public life, and rightly so, and I want to make sure that absolutely we've got equality of access, equality of accessibility, and in terms of employment opportunities as well. So again, it's an area that is woven through all of my my previous career really, and I would want to make sure that absolutely we are upholding the best practice, and that we are providing opportunities and not being passive about that, equality and diversity. So very much looking at how that would work across all of the force area. In fact, I don't think it's in your papers, but I was previously, some years ago, part of the independent advisory group for Devon and Cornwall in a voluntary capacity. And I sat on the age and gender workshops for those, so very much familiar with how that works in the police force and looking forward to re-engaging with that.
Philip.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here representing Torres District Council, a very rural area, and I noticed since 1993 you've been working in Torbay, which is a very urban area. We've got local police stations that are, in essence, just canteens. Very sparse policing on the ground. What's your vision of policing in rural areas in the 21st century? What access are we going to get?
Okay, another big question to answer. But I think it's about making sure that Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly have some challenges, both in terms of our seasonality and the number of people that visit us during the summer months, but also the rural nature of the geography. So I think it's absolutely trying to understand those communities and where those communities need access. Now that might be physical access in terms of a police station or an access point somewhere in a locality, but equally it's about embracing some of our new digital technologies as well and making different sorts of accesses appropriate where appropriate. And again, I think it's something that we need to align with the estate strategy to see how that will work, and some of the work that I know is being looked at with the Strategic Alliance at the moment. So looking forward to trying to understand how that would work across the patch and making sure that we've got that model right.
Can I just drill you down for a bit of detail there, because you haven't really told me anything. We have empty police stations, if you like, and we have a very sparse rural police service. How do you see it? You know, I've heard the rhetoric, but what does it mean?
Well, I think it's, given that I'm not currently in that role, it's difficult for me to give a view, because I'm giving you a view on what I've read and what I've seen. So I think it's quite difficult for me to give you a specific. I mean, subject to today, I'm happy to come back to a future meeting and give you some of that detail when I've had the opportunity to drill down into some of that detail, Councillor. But I think at the moment it would be quite difficult for me to give you a view without understanding both the police and the PCC's view.
No, that's fair enough, I think, Philip. Yeah, good question. Nearly a good answer. And hopefully you can come back in future.
Yes, thank you. It's on a totally unrelated to what I said earlier, but we understand that operationally the makeup of the police workforce, the staff, is very much an operational decision for the Chief Constable, which he formulates in order to meet what's set out for him to do by the Commissioner's policing plan. And I fully understand that there's been pressures to respond to incidents by warranted police officers, which afford more flexibility, they work more hours and they can do more things. But to our communities, their only face of policing has become the PCSOs. Now, in the current plan, there is definitely a change in emphasis, a reduction in PCSOs to a few more police officers. In some ways, I can understand that. I fully understand that. But what can you do? What will you see as your role be to actually replace or make sure that the communities don't lose that face-to-face contact with police, and particularly as very much the intelligence to do with, for example, identifying disaffected, even radicalisation is very much to do with that local contact by PCSOs working closely within their communities.
So I'm a great advocate of a face-to-face contact, and that local intelligence is absolutely critical. And certainly in the past, where I've worked with PCSOs and in Torbay with our street wardens, actually that connectivity with neighbourhoods and really understanding who's doing what, where our vulnerable clients might be and how that neighbourhood works, I would be a great advocate of trying to retain that wherever possible. However, I understand that there are plans to reduce those PCSO numbers as you've outlined, but I think if those were removed, I'd want to have an understanding of and replaced with what else, really. And I think that what else might be different depending on the locality that we're talking about. So I think there are different ways of engaging with communities. I would say that it doesn't always require a PCSO or a warranted officer, but I think we'd have to have a look at how that might work and what might be appropriate in each case. But I think the most important thing is that connectivity with the communities, however we're able to get that to work.
Thank you. I think we're just in danger of straying into operational matters there. So just be mindful, members. Carolyn, welcome back.
Thank you, Chairman. And good morning. How will you deal with any conflicts that may arise between the Chief Constable and the Police Commissioner on methods of performance or related funding?
Okay, so there's inevitably going to be some tensions, and it's not an area of work in which I'm unfamiliar. I think it's about that relationship and understanding what both strategic intent is going to be and understanding how that will be delivered. If there's a need to resolve that conflict in some way, I don't have any issue with trying to resolve that conflict. It's an area of work that happens whenever there's an interface both with a chief executive and a political leader, but also when there's almost a third party, if you like, in terms of the Chief Constable. I'll be looking forward to working with him and his team and understanding where there are both alignments in terms of the police and crime plan and operational policing, but where there are areas of disagreement. And I'd want to get those areas of disagreement, or ones that aren't quite aligned, out in the open early on, so that I can understand where those will be.
Okay, Carolyn? Yep. Robert?
Thank you, Chair. The PCC is a great supporter of CCTV in communities and sees the benefit of them. Could I have your thoughts on how you could support on that?
Certainly, Councillor. As you know, I'm responsible for the CCTV service in Torbay. It's very much part of the community safety offer, but the wider offer in terms of place, because it helps not only with managing nighttime economy, but assists with the management of the overall tourist offer in Torbay and the intelligence that we're able to deliver. So I'd be very much a supporter of the PCC's view that CCTV is one of the tools we have in our toolbox in terms of addressing crime and disorder, particularly on business crime, which doesn't always get some of the profile. I think it's an area where we can work a lot with business and with traders to make some inroads and build relationships.
Thank you. Keith, I'll come back.
Thank you, Chairman. Mindful of your comments and not going into operational matters, I'd like to say that, I would welcome, if you're successful, to come back and talk to us about rural policing, because actually that's, a point well made and subject dear to my heart, coming from the South Hams. And also, I'm a big supporter of PCSOs. I think reducing them is counterproductive, I have to say. But that's for another day, Chairman, I'm sure.
Indeed. We'll ask the Chief Constable to come at one stage to explain personally, I think. Any more questions, members? No. Oh, I better put that on. Thank you very much. Don't know if there's anything you want to add at all. You don't have to. And Commissioner, anything you want to say at all? At all? No? Great. Mrs. Hughes, thanks very much for coming. I think now, what would the procedure, I think now, is the fact that Mrs. Hughes can stay in the room quite clearly, or go away and have a cup of tea or something, and we'll ask the prospective treasurer to come in, if that's okay, and ask her a few questions and give her a couple of minutes to explain her background. Mrs. Hughes, thanks very much. Welcome. Mrs. Allen. Commissioner, do you want to do a couple of minutes and explain, or no, Duncan? Yes. Quite forgot about that. Welcome again, Duncan.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the panel. I'll just say a few words of introduction for Nicola. The Treasurer role, as you're well aware, is a statutory role. It's quite an interesting role within the police service, because there are two what we know as Section 151 officers, one for the force and one for the PCC. This is the senior of those two roles, and so if there are any conflicts financially, this role has the final say in that conflict resolution. And also the role as a 151 officer reports to the Chief Executive, advises the PCC, but also has that special responsibility which goes back to Victorian times of being able to report to the council taxpayer at large if there's possibility of the budget not balancing, or if there is any expenditure that is not legal. So it is it has a very sort of solid statutory context, but clearly within the whole of the police service, then it forms as a major part of the management decision making and ensuring that financial probity and finance is taken into the decision making process. So that requires a wide knowledge of the service areas and also in terms of the experience that needs to be brought to specific issues. In terms of the process, we've gone through that in the paper, but we've done that internally, and we have gone to external advertisement. There were 9 original applicants for the job. We got that down to 4. 3 of those were female, 1 was male. A good cross-section of people applied. Local government, health service and external financial consultants. So we had a good range of applicants, which has proved for others quite difficult. So we've been very lucky to have attracted such a good set of candidates. We gave them the same as the chief executive, a case study, which was a budget gap exercise, which was sort of a realistic test. And then we had a panel which contained Councillor Salton as an independent member, the Commissioner and myself and somebody from HR. And we went through a series of technical questions and questions around competencies. At the end of that, we were unanimous as a panel that Nicola Allen was the right person for the job. And therefore is proposed today for confirmation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Duncan. Anyone, panel members, got any comment? No, thank you very much. Nicola, you have 5 minutes to impress the panel. I'm sure you will.
Thank you. It's very nice to be able to be here in person to speak to the panel. If I just cover a little bit of what my experience has been to date, the majority of my experience has been in public sector finance, and since the late 1990s I've been in senior finance roles throughout Devon. The interesting times we've had lately with austerity has proved quite challenging, and the role I undertake at the moment has been key in looking at different ways of working, transformation, and how we will actually bridge the gap within our MTFS. And it's been quite a strategic role to look at savings plans, how we might change our delivery models and our expansion of commissioning. One of the areas that I have quite a lot of experience in is to do with funding formulas. And at the moment we're dealing, within my current role, I'm dealing quite a lot with things like schools funding formulas and how that impacts across the Devon geographic. Funding formulas, in my experience in this part of the world, do not always take full impact of sparsity, rurality and deprivation. So I think those are key aspects that we need to keep an eye on with any funding formula as they come through. So I think those are the sorts of experience I've got in that area. I also work very closely with service users and also service officers and members, looking at strategically how we're going to be moving forward and what solutions we can come up with. I'm very keen to work in partnership with people so that there's a very collaborative approach about how we come up with our solutions. One of the key aspects that's been prevalent in my work recently has been around commissioning. And commissioning, Devon County Council, as you probably know, is a commissioning authority, and so we promote the use of commissioning extensively. And this can take many different vises, and predominantly we've been using it within our transformation agenda to look at the way in which we deliver services, and that can be in partnership, it can be a straightforward procurement, or it can be making sure that we've got the needs of the services and the right way forward for individual services. So they can be different solutions for different areas of the service. That links quite neatly with the transformation agenda, and I think that I've taken a lead on the transformation within the finance service within Devon County, where we're looking at predominantly our transformation has been around the digital agenda and how we can move that forward and the way that people will access our service. So that's been quite a significant area of work for me at the moment. Treasury management is something I've got quite a lot of experience on as well. In my former roles, I've been in charge of treasury management in district councils. And in my experience, it's getting the balance right between the strategy for borrowing, investment, and the key one being risk. So it's all about making sure that we've got the right balance in all of those areas. I think with the austerity agenda as it's been recently, risk has been quite a significant factor that we have to make sure we've got covered. With the reduction in the level of funding that people have got, risk has become, I think, probably the biggest area of work. One of the other areas that of my experience is within estates, and the estates portfolio obviously comes under this role for the Treasurer for the OPCC. In previous roles, premises has actually come under me, so in one of my previous career elements, I had all the premises under me, which entailed putting in an estate strategy and looking at rationalisation of those premises. The key objective of that estates plan was about fit for purpose. And it's not only fit for purpose for the service users, but also for the workforce and the way in which they need to work, which, as we know, with the onslaught of social media and the digital agenda, can be very different in the way that people access the service. So it's all about the accessibility strategy for users and the workforce, which is quite a key thing. I've obviously been through the estate strategy for the OPCC. There are a number of properties over the whole of the area, and it is a very big, sparse area, and a number of the properties are of an age where we need to really be thinking about their fit for purpose and things like backlog maintenance, etc. My current role, the property experience I've got there is I'm a director on the Sky Park board, which is a business park just by Exeter Airport, which is being developed, and we do that in partnership with a commercial property developer, which is a very interesting project, and that entails looking at development opportunities, looking at plans for development, the funding of those plans, and how that might take forward the return on investment, etc. So quite a lot of aspects there. But it's not only about the development, it's also about our role as landlord as well, and landowner, because there's quite a lot of issues to be considered when you're dealing with land ownership. My other predominance of experience in that is I'm the shareholder representative for Devon County Council on the Science Park Board. So that's the other park that's being developed just outside Exeter. And that's very different because that's about a science park and has quite a gateway process for who is allowed onto that park. And that's a different form because that's working in partnership with other local authorities and the universities. So quite an element of my work, I do a lot of collaboration with other public sector bodies and also other private investors, working quite closely with contractors and suppliers. I think I'll leave it at there if there's any questions.
Thanks, Nikki. Well, I was going to ask a question on estate management, but I think we'll leave that for another day because you seem to have covered that comfortably at the moment. But I think we should be aware the fact that thanks, Chris. Estates are a big factor, and this will come back again and again. And the Commissioner may shake her head, but I still say that it's flip-flop from the Chief Constable to the OPCC and back again, and now it's in your patch again. So it's really quite important. I suppose the one question I'm going to ask is the fact that Your CV is very interesting. You've worked with a team, within a team for many, many years. Here, you are a sort of like a one-off, if you like. So what would be your thoughts on the fact that you are the one, if you like, the one treasurer in the OPCC, and often you haven't anyone reporting to you. Yes, you might report to the chief executive or the commissioner, but you don't have a team anymore.
Yes, it is something that obviously I've been used to having a team around me. I don't necessarily see a significant issue there. I think it's about working closely with the force side to ensure that it's done in a collaborative manner. It's also about taking on board the requirements of the service. Now, there may be disagreement at times, but I would like to think that we'd be able to work together to come up with the right solution for Devon and Cornwall Police. And I think it's not about what the right solution is for an individual. It's about the authority as a whole and making sure that we've got the right objectives. And what I would always come back to is what the objectives are in the plan and what we're looking for in there. And I would want to understand, if there is a difference of opinion, how that links to the plan and how that will push that forward. The plan has a lot in there about community, working with the communities, etc. There's lots of different ways of working with the communities. I think with estates are just a tool to access a service. So we need to think about how that can be different. But working without a team is slightly unusual, but I've been used to working in collaboration with services in my own role, which I would have no direct line management over now. So it's about that negotiating, influencing and coming up with common solutions.
Thank you. Philip. Carolyn. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to sort of take a quantum shift if I can. And I've got a question actually about this panel. Leaving aside for a moment the fact that we exist because statute says we have to exist, how do you see your relationship to this panel? Do you see this panel adding value to your role or getting in the way of your role or being a tick box, or how do you perceive that relationship?
I think this panel is invaluable because we can go along as officers and come up with solutions. And this panel I see as being able to provide that challenge environment and to actually make sure that what we're doing, that it stands up to the challenge of the panel and what the plan says originally. So I see it enhancing. I've always been very keen on the transparency agenda and within my role, scrutiny. I attend quite a lot of scrutiny committees where we are challenged about what we're doing. If something doesn't have a good, sound business case and can't stand up to the challenge, then we do have to rethink what we're doing. So I see this panel as being that I would like to work very closely with this panel to make sure that we've got that in there.
Carolyn.
Really, you've touched on it a little bit, but if I can just drill down a little bit more, how will you deal with any conflicts that may arise between the Chief Constable and the Commissioner on methods of performance and related funding? I know you've touched on it, but if you could sort of give us a little bit more on that.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to work it through as a collaborative. I'd like to be able to work through and discuss things, put forward ideas, understand what the differences of opinions are, and go from there so that we can come up with some common understanding. If we get to a worst case scenario, as Duncan said, this is a statutory role and I would have to be looking to maybe escalate it further. But for me, that's a worst case scenario and I would want to be addressing it with the Police Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable first to understand why there's a difference. And again, what's best for the Devon and Cornwall Police.
Kevin.
Thank you. You alluded to hard times, as it were, financially, like the rest of the public sector. And you mentioned several times, actually, one possible solution to that would be collaboration with other public bodies and private bodies. It sounded like you've had some experience of this. Could you elaborate a little bit on your thinking and the impact it would have on the ground?
So obviously I'm aware of the strategic alliance with Dorset and the way that's working. The experience, I'll talk about my experience and then my ideas. My experience of it is that as a county council, we work very closely with Somerset County and we actually share services. So we share our trading standards, we share our pensions administration. We work very closely, Devon Audit Partnership is Devon, Torbay and Plymouth. So we've got quite a history of working in collaboration with other public sectors. We also work, and this is a bit more difficult, to work with contractors and suppliers. And when we work in partnership with them, it's really about looking at risk share. It's really about looking at how we can mitigate some of their risk so that we can impact on maybe the cost of a service or the way it's performed going forward. So it's really about getting those efficiencies out of it. My view is that sometimes the bigger you are, it can be quite difficult to operate. However, there is something to say about purchasing power, and I'm always very keen to explore ideas of working in partnership, whether that's with another local authority or whether it's with something like the CCGs or the fire authority. Those are all options which I think are open to be explored, and I would be open to those sorts of things. I think change is a good thing. If you don't change, you're just going to stay in, you're going to stay in the past and not move forward with where the service needs to be. So I think actually the strategic alliance is quite a big step forward on that, and quite a very good step forward on that. Has this answered your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
David. Sue.
And David.
And David. Okay.
You've clearly got a good understanding of Devon, and you clearly are committed to collaboration. I just wonder your understanding of Cornwall and where collaborative effort and benefits might be being delivered and could be delivered there.
Obviously, my knowledge of Cornwall is not as extensive as it is of Devon, and that's one of the things I'd like to address, subject today when I start with Devon and Cornwall. But I think there's still collaborative approaches that can be done there. I have worked with colleagues at Cornwall County Council on different objectives. They've not come to a lot of fruition, I will say, but we still have been discussing how we can move forward. So it's one of probably the weaker areas, but I think it's something that I would have to spend time on as soon as I came into the role.
If subject to today, I'm sure you will be welcome down to Cornwall, and I'm sure we will be able to look at fruitful ways forward.
Thank you, Sue. David.
You spoke in your opening spiel about rationalisation. You spoke about digitalisation, but the reality is policing is such that at the end of the day, somebody needs to be there to have their collar felt. Where will you fall when it becomes to officer numbers or going down a digital route and a CCTV route? Which side of the fence are you going to be?
I think on those sorts of issues, it comes to a balance. There's always going to be needed people on the front line and there being a presence. I think what I was talking mainly about, the digital agenda, is quite a lot of the back office services, and there may be some fringe elements that we can deal with on digital, but that does not ever get over the need for people to be on the front line. It's very important to the community. You can see that in the responses that they've done to the plan. So I would never be looking to replace the frontline services with digital. There may be opportunities, like I say, on the fringes, but I think they would have to be explored very carefully.
Thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Robert, yeah, sorry.
Just a quick one. Sorry, just a quick one. You mentioned Cornwall. Obviously, you don't have so much experience down there, but you obviously got it on your agenda. Could I ask what you know about the Isles of Scilly, and will that not be forgotten?
In my experience today, I have had some contact with the Isles of Scilly, more around the education agenda. So I have had some contacts, and that again is one of the areas that I would need to be building my knowledge on. But I have had some fringe dealings with the Isles of Scilly.
Okay, thanks for that. Philip.
John.
Philip, yeah.
I feel obliged to ask this question because I did ask the potential candidate for the Chief Executive's role as well. Over many years, having had 40 years' experience in the NHS and sitting on West Devon and Devon County Council, we've all tried over the years to deal with the one public estate issue, and we've all paid lip service to actually getting better cooperation, better use and so on. My own assessment is, by and large, we've failed. There are some areas of good examples, and there are places in the country where it's worked extremely well, but I don't think we've done particularly well in the South West. How are you going to deal with that when you come to look at the police estate? You've obviously got as a priority the police estate and the fact that you've got a lot of empty and unused property, so that's going to be high up your list, my guess is. But how are you going to try and encourage the rest of us, the councils and the NHS and everything, to actually seriously sit down together and start trying to make some sense of it?
Obviously, I have quite a lot of networks within the Devon side of it, and I would like to develop those networks on the Cornwall side of that and then the Isles of Scilly as well. I think that we have lots of opportunities for collaboration. I've obviously got quite a lot of networks within Devon County Council, but I also deal with CCGs as well. So I'm hoping to use those networks to be able to push that forward. I would agree with you, the one public estate we've struggled with, and I think austerity has made that harder because people have been very concerned about cost and return on their investment. And I think we probably need to get over some of those hurdles and ensure that there is a mutual benefit for the way we go forward in that collaboration with the use of estates. There's lots of opportunities with things, and the chairman will be familiar with these, with things like libraries. So there is a vast estate of libraries across the whole of the region. That's just for an example of the things that I'm aware of. So I think it's about making sure we've got some sort of mutual benefit between both parties to move forward.
I'm glad you didn't say that the chairman... He vigorously defends the position and says he's not closed a single library.
Thank you for that, Philip. Yeah. John.
Thank you, Chairman. You're going to be appointed, if you are, as the Treasurer for Devon and Cornwall. Now, how much time do you think you'll be spending in Dorset? Are they, I don't know if you know this, but it's unfair, are they contributing to your salary? Are they involved in this more than we think they are? And how do you find your role in relation to, as being appointed by Devon and Cornwall, you'll be working perhaps for or with Dorset? Thank you.
Chair, I'll just clarify something there. The Dorset police are a separate accountable body at this point in time, and they have their own treasurer. That role at the moment, there is no financial contribution at the moment towards that role from our side. One of the things I will say is that when we were looking at the role before it went out to advertisement, is we did look at whether there was any synergies or any benefit for us joining with Dorset, but given the sort of full-time nature of the role that is here at the moment, and given the views of the PCC in Dorset, it was decided not at this stage to look at a combined role. So I hope that just helps in terms of the context of the question.
Through you, Chairman, I just think about asking the question where it was unfair to you, but I just wondered how you found your role in relation to Dorset.
So regardless, my prime concern will be Devon and Cornwall Police. It has to be. That's what I'm there for, and that's my prime function. My work with the Dorset and the Strategic Alliance will be around the efficiencies that can be achieved of bringing that together as a strategic alliance. Now, obviously, when we're looking at it, we've got to have a mutual benefit of those efficiencies. So I think my prime will be about obviously about Devon and Cornwall Police, because that's where I'm the treasurer of, and then it will be about what efficiencies can be achieved by working with Dorset. And I think there are quite a lot of efficiencies that can be achieved. I know it started with the back office services now, so I think there's a lot that can be explored on that, but no, my prime has got to be Devon and Cornwall.
Thank you, Chair.
think at this time they are separate forces. Any further questions? Chris, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, Nicola, which you're not in position to probably answer this at this moment, but one thing I have sought many, many times is something printed in writing that I can look at to see what the advantages of the strategic alliance is savings-wise. I would love to see that our police cars, we've saved £200,000 a year on police cars in the last 2 years or something, because when we set this up, or when we agreed to this, we were told that that was what it was about, jointly buying police cars, body armour, everything under the sun, and it was going to be big savings. But I think it's about 6 times I've asked previous, and Duncan, you might be able to come in on this in a moment, but 6 times I've asked this, I think at least, and I've yet to see any figures appear in front of me what they were in 2014 or 15 compared with 15-16 or 16-17. So where are the savings? I mean, for someone to turn around and say, oh, we saved £2 million or something a year, but where? And that's what I would like, and hopefully you will be able to supply, hopefully when you're in office.
Duncan, this is necessarily brief.
It will be. Chair, we are due to bring in front of the panel in October a presentation on the strategic alliance, and that will deal in detail in terms of the financial savings at that point.
Thank you, Duncan. Any further questions, members? Nicola, thanks very much. I will now sort of announce a short adjournment. We'll clear the room. That is not you, members. You've got to stay. We'll contact you shortly. Thank you, Commissioner. Duncan. Oh, Fran, Nicola, welcome. The panel were unanimous in endorsing the Commissioner's appointment with some very kind words. What we will do now is to, I'll get Joe to sort out a formal letter to the OPCC within the next sort of couple of days. I think it is. We've got a day or two, is it, or something? So she's got some work to do. There will be a couple of comments in there from the panel, but otherwise, congratulations over there, and well done for a good pick, Commissioner. I don't know whether you want to say anything at all. Don't have to, but you will. Yeah.
Well, why not? As I've kept myself quite quiet, just to thank the panel for your considered questions and appreciate your support in this. It's really important we get the senior management team in position. I'm really excited to be working with both Fran and Nicola, and I think they'll bring some really great value to you when they come in front of you on particularly on meaty agenda items that you're concerned about. So thank you very much.
Okay, it just falls to me to bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, members, Commissioner, Fran and Nicola, Duncan, thank you for your input, and best of luck in the future in your Caribbean island or whatever it is. And I have to... Oh, is it Pentan? So sorry. Well, it's nearly a Caribbean island then, okay. Yeah. And just one final thing. This is Lynn's last meeting. She is going to Plymouth College of Art to do a degree in something or other, and I'm really, really impressed with her, and I can't even remember the name of it, but...
Costume production.
Costume production. Wonderful. So best of luck to Lynn, and thanks very much for her help. And Joe, thanks very much for your assistance today. Members, thanks very much. I'll close the meeting.